Hey guys, we're going back to the early 1980s to check out Nintendo's first ever hit, the original Donkey Kong. Now, during this video we'll be unboxing a bunch of versions, and that includes Donkey Kong 4, Apple's first consumer PC, the original Atari, Nintendo's first handheld, a mini version of the arcade, and also some games and toys. Alright guys, so let's unbox them. So first, let's very briefly discuss what is likely Nintendo's most important game in their entire history. So, back in 1980, Nintendo had not yet created any of the popular franchises, such as Mario or Zelda, and they had just opened up a new North American branch. So Nintendo was really struggling to break into the North American market, and their initial arcade attempts failed, so their future was very much in doubt. That all changed when a very young Shigeru Miyamoto created Donkey Kong for the arcade, which released in 1981. Donkey Kong was the first game with a story that actually played out on screen, and it's also the first platformer. It's a simple story where you play as Jumpman, who was later renamed Mario. Now the story says that Mario was mistreating his pet ape Donkey Kong, and honestly guys, I kind of feel bad for Donkey Kong here. But regardless, Donkey Kong got his revenge by escaping and taking Jumpman's girlfriend Pauline. Now, Jumpman must jump to the top of the stage, but then once you reach the top, Donkey Kong takes Pauline to a different stage. From there, you must once again navigate to the top. Now, the game looks pretty simple, but it was actually one of the toughest arcade games ever produced. After a very successful arcade launch, Nintendo licensed the game to Coleco, who created a lot of different home console variants. Remember, this was before Nintendo released the first home console, the Nintendo Entertainment System. One of the earliest and most popular versions was for the Atari 2600, released in 1982. I have the European version here, which has a much more aggressive looking art style than the North American box. Now, for those wondering, this is factory sealed but also mass produced, so I only spent about $20 for it. Still, it's pretty fun to unbox a game that's nearly 40 years old. Now this game, like all the other ports at the time, is a pretty simplified version of the arcade game. The content of the box is pretty minimal, with just a black and white manual and a cartridge. Now the story of how the name Donkey Kong was actually created is Miyamoto is looking in a Japanese-English dictionary for something that would mean stubborn gorilla. So donkey means stubborn, and Kong was a common Japanese slang for gorilla. We'll also unbox Donkey Kong for the Atari 7800, which came out 6 years later. This box is not factory sealed and was previously opened, but it still has the original content. Here we have the game. And also a much nicer colored manual. The box in particular is pretty massive for so little material. So some more history on the game. Now Donkey Kong was inspired by Popeye, King Kong, and Beauty and the Beast. It was actually originally a Popeye game, but Nintendo could not obtain the rights to it, so they created these Donkey Kong characters and reskinned it. Now we have a variant for the Apple II, which is Apple's first computer aimed at consumers. Now this version was released in 1984 and is one of about 20 ports released during the 80s. However, I picked this one since Apple is pretty relevant to our channel. And for those wondering, right after this unboxing we're going to actually start playing some handheld versions, rather than this unboxing. So this game, like the Atari 2600 variant, is factory sealed, but also mass produced and pretty cheap for only $20. Now the box is much larger than it needs to be, but it at least does have some nice colored manuals. Now another quick tidbit is Universal Studios sued Nintendo over the name Donkey Kong, which they said was too close to King Kong. Nintendo was defended in court by a man named John Kirby, who ultimately won the case for Nintendo, and even had a game character named in his honor. We also, of course, have the floppy disk. Now we're getting into some actual hardware, and we have Nintendo's first handheld series called Game & Watch. Now at the time, portables like this played only one game per handheld, unlike the Game Boy which released a decade later. This version of Game & Watch is of course Donkey Kong, which released in 1982. As you can tell, this box was previously opened and is also the Japanese variant. Still, we have the most important thing inside, which is Game & Watch, and also the manual. Now the hardware itself is pretty lightweight and also looks pretty nice. So this inspired the design of the Nintendo DS more than 2 decades later. It runs on a couple batteries that I've never seen before. Now, actually playing this is pretty tough and very difficult to see. Like most other ports, it's also a pretty simplified version of the arcade. I also had Jackie play since she's a big Nintendo fan.
Oh my gosh. This is even more difficult than
Yeah, it is more
the other
difficult.
one. Just really hard to see. I wonder how people are playing at nighttime, you know. When I was younger, my dad had the same game on the original Nintendo console.
Yeah, the NES, right?
Yes, but the image quality and the music were a lot better on that system. This one I think is just too simplified. I like that version better.
The NES version is pretty similar to the original arcade version. But yeah, this one it's very, very simplified. And it's also, I think it's a lot harder to control.
Yes, I agree.
One last game, we have a mini arcade variant, which Coleco released in 1981. This actually was the earliest version of the game, besides of course the arcade original. The box was previously opened, but the game does fully operate, and it's also in pretty great condition. Like the large arcade original, this has some pretty nice artwork. The device overall is pretty large and heavy, and it also takes 4 large batteries. Actually playing the game was a lot more fun than playing on the Game & Watch. However, it is still pretty basic compared to the arcade original. Once again, Jackie did try out this version.
definitely a fun game, but it's not really easy, at least not for me. But it definitely is an impressive game for early 80s.
Yeah, with the backlit screen and everything.
Yeah.
Finally, we're going to check in on some toys that launched alongside this game. So, in the early 1980s, Donkey Kong was everywhere, from toys to cereal. Now, obviously, I'm not going to unbox and eat some 40-year-old cereal, but we do have a Pauline toy and a pack of trading cards. Looking at the designs, obviously these characters look pretty different from today. Pauline in particular looks completely different here than in Super Mario Odyssey. Now, these trading cards were very overproduced and just $4 sealed. For any of you who are fans of sport cards, it's definitely pretty cool to open a Topps pack from the early 80s. Something pretty interesting is we have some extremely old gum. So it's pretty hard, it's completely cracked, and you definitely should not eat it. For the cards themselves, I don't think anyone really collected these, but they're definitely still pretty interesting. One more tidbit, when Jumpman was eventually renamed Mario, it was in honor of Nintendo's landlord. The pack also shipped with some scratch-up cards, which no longer work. Now, all that said, if you're interested in playing the game today, I would not actually recommend anything you saw here. Don't buy any of these versions. Instead, if you have a Switch and an online subscription, then open the NES app and play the 1983 version of the game, which was released for the NES. So this one is definitely a lot easier than the arcade version, but it is pretty similar. It is missing some things like cutscenes. If you want to play an exact port of the arcade original, you can also download that from the eShop for $8. With this version, you can also play it in portrait mode. I do think it's worth buying if you're up for the challenge. Alright guys, this is a new series focused on retro tech. So if you enjoyed the video, then definitely check out Sony's first Android. Thanks for watching, subscribe for more. And let me know in the comments below if you have any questions.